Welcome to my new YouTube channel. I'm Andrew Tempty. Today we're going to do a bit of an introduction. I don't know you, and you don't know me, but I'd really like to fix that. My North Star is very simple. I want to use my 30-plus years of experience in education and business to help others learn, grow, and hopefully avoid some of the mud puddles that I've stepped in along the way. A little bit about myself. I'm first a son, I'm a husband, I'm a father, I'm an author, podcaster, entrepreneur, I'm a founder, former chief executive officer of a wonderful company called Kaplan Professional. I'm an educator and a teacher. I hold a PhD in finance from the University of Iowa, and I'm also a CFA charter holder. I'm a thought leader in education, skilling, and business management. I'm a deep introvert and a musician, and I'm coming to you from lovely La Crosse, Wisconsin, one of those flyover states in the upper Midwest. I've prepared a few icebreaker questions. I've got my cards here just like it's a talk show. My dear wife, Linda, randomized them for me before I got started this morning. So here's the first one. Andy, do you like tea or coffee? Well, that's an interesting question. I used to love coffee. I drank so much coffee, it actually ate a hole in my stomach while I was in graduate school. So my mentor, Carl Swayzer, turned me on to tea, and I've been on tea ever since. So thank you, English breakfast tea, for saving me. What's my favorite food? It has to be my wife's no-boil lasagna. I literally can eat the whole pan. It's like I can't stop eating that stuff. It's just wonderful. So she probably put that in there as second on purpose. Third question, snow or the beach? Well, I live in the upper Midwest, so we get plenty of snow. And so on vacation, I don't necessarily like to go see more snow. So it's definitely the beach and the water for me. My favorite color? Well, my favorite color is blue. Lots of different shades of blue. I just love the color blue. I'm also, as a University of Iowa graduate, big into black and gold, as you might imagine. Where did I grow up? That's the next question. I grew up right here in La Crosse, Wisconsin. I live on a bluff outside town, but I grew up on 10th and Cameron Avenue in La Crosse. Wonderful experience. So I'm a small town guy, but if I had to live in a big city, which one would I live in? Well, I've thought about this a lot, and I really like London, but I've been to Sydney, Australia on a number of occasions. And if I had to live in a big city, even though Australia is a long way away and fairly isolated, I would definitely live in Sydney, Australia. If you ever get the chance to go, I'm a one-man poster for the wonders of Australia. So definitely visit there if you can. If I could immediately gain one skill, what would it be? Well, the challenge that I've had for most of my life is I'm a one language speaker, and I really regret that. You know, I don't have a lot of regrets. I can count my regrets really on one hand, but not knowing a second language fluently and be able to engage with speakers from other cultures is a real miss on my part. I'm 58 years old, so there's still lots of time left. Who knows? Maybe I'll check that one off the bucket list. This is a good one. What's the worst trouble you got into as a kid? Well, I'm actually a high school dropout. So as you can imagine, I got into a lot of trouble as a kid. And your mind is probably reeling. Okay, you hold a PhD from the University of Iowa, but you're a high school dropout. You're probably still trying to compute that. Well, one night, remember, we're back to what's the most trouble I got into as a kid. One night as a 16-year-old, I used to sneak out of the house at night, and I lived in the basement. My room was down there, down in the dungeon. I was kind of a vampire when I was a kid. So I would, there was the little bitty windows, no bigger than the computer monitor that I'm looking at right now. And I would be able to open them up and squeeze my way out and then go out and party with my friends and then come home at 3 o'clock in the morning, or whenever I got around to rolling back home. Well, my dad caught wind of it, and one night he nailed the window shut after I left. And so, tail between my legs, knocked on the front door at 3 o'clock in the morning, and you know who was waiting for me. Next question. Who's my favorite band? My favorite band is Rush. Canadian trio. Unfortunately, we lost Neil Peart a couple of years ago, and so Rush is no longer touring and performing, but just love progressive rock, Yes, Kansas, etc., and Rush is definitely at the top of that list. By the way, I would love to meet Alex and Geddy Lee if I ever got the chance. Finally, my favorite cartoon character. Well, he's sitting right over my right shoulder on the couch back there, and that is Snoopy. I love Snoopy because Snoopy is the every dog. Snoopy knows how to do a lot of different things. He's a chef. He's a pilot. He's a farmer. He loves to take naps. So I like to think of myself as a bit of a Renaissance man, and Snoopy certainly fits that mold. So Snoopy is about everywhere that I go, Snoopy follows. And if you come see my band, The Remainders, you will see Snoopy and Woodstock somewhere on stage every night. Now, just a little bit more about myself. I'm a citizen of the United States, but I'm also a global citizen. We all live on this pale blue dot together. We are all in this together. Partisan bickering and imagining that somehow we belong in tightly defined groups, I think is a false narrative. At the end of the day, we're all traveling through space on a little bitty ball, circling an unremarkable star in an unremarkable corner of an unremarkable galaxy, quoting the late Carl Sagan. So I believe strongly that diversity, equity, and inclusion is incredibly important, that we understand one another, understand our needs, understand how we think very differently from one another, that each human being is a unique creation. And to imagine that somehow we're coin-operated cogs in a big wheel or robots, I think is and followers of blind followers. I think that's just a real dangerous thing. As you might imagine from that, I believe strongly that discourse should be grounded in logic, rational thought, critical thinking, and reason. We should be striving, when we listen, we should be striving to understand and not tear others down. I know I've been guilty many, many times of tearing other people down. And I really, that's in the category of some of those regrets that I have when I haven't really listened with an open mind and open ears and used 2 ears, 1 mouth in that ratio. And I've definitely torn other people down, and I regret that. My leadership style, I'm a continuous improvement and organizational health leader who believes that people are a business's most valuable asset, and that the most critical business imperative is the creation of high trust, high accountability organizational cultures that promote flow of ideas and of handoffs and processes within the business. So that all goes back to that continuous improvement background, married with that of organizational health, where trust is the foundation. We're going to talk a lot more about that in just a moment. Now, where can you find me? Well, this is the Saturday Morning Muse, the video edition, and I launch that every Saturday morning on my website, andrewtempty.com. So on andrewtempty.com, you can find a description of my first book, which is called Balancing Act. Balancing Act is really the what and the why of my management style, and many of the things that I've already alluded to in terms of what my philosophies are. There's a lot of stories from my childhood and our business life that are used as tools to set up many of the lessons, the balancing acts that we all play, and there are many balancing acts that are contained in that book. So as you might imagine, it's all a balancing act. Should we live all the time, all day, every day on one side of an argument or another? Absolutely not. We should be, as I said before, seeking to understand both sides of an argument and embrace the best that the human experience has to offer. We'll talk a little bit more about some of the other balancing acts in just a moment. I've also got a podcast that you can find at andrewtempty.com. And on that podcast, we've got, to date, we've got 33 episodes that are out in the wild, and we've got many more in the can ready to release this summer. I invite guests on. I have a co-host that interviews me. And so we spend about 25 to 30 minutes really peeling apart issues, especially as they relate to workforce development, upskilling, reskilling. I've got a whole series on the ego and how that relates with things like empathy and vulnerability and creativity, etc. So I think you'll find the podcast and our guests very interesting. As I mentioned before, we also have every Saturday we publish the Saturday Morning Muse, where I take a topic and dive deep into that particular topic. I'm also working on book number 2. Book number 2, no surprise, continues that theme of continuous improvement and organizational health, and really has that aim of helping you create those high trust, high accountability cultures that I talked about, creating that flow within your business. Again, the flow in handoffs, flow in processes. I live in the upper Midwest, so we literally have beavers that create dams. So think about all the blockers and all the beaver dams that individuals either explicitly or subconsciously create within your business. And so we're going to tell a lot of stories about how to break those dams apart and create more flow in your business. I talk a lot about the skills of the future and of work readiness and work engagement. I believe very strongly that we must balance human skill with technical skill. Now, what's human skill? Well, human skill is also known as soft skills. Well, I'm on a one-man crusade to eliminate the phrase soft skills from our vernacular, because there's literally nothing harder than adopting and growing the soft skills or the human skills within your skill portfolio. If you look at any top 10 list of skills of the future, they're going to contain things like authenticity and empathy and creativity and curiosity and agility and collaboration and teaming. And all of those things are highly dependent on effective communication skills. So as computers begin to think at ever increasing cognitive levels, very low cognitive states right now, but definitely will be increasing in the future, what will we have to bring to the world of work but our whole selves and our human experience and the diversity and capturing and leveraging that diversity of the human experience? Now, in terms of technical skill, I'm adamant that we must grow 3 main technical skills. And I'm not talking about deep expertise. If you want to be an expert in one of these areas, then fantastic. I'm talking more about acumen and literacy. And the first one is financial acumen. As a finance professor, somebody that has earned a PhD and has lived most of my life in finance and accounting and business management, we are woefully unprepared from a financial perspective, both in our personal lives and in our business lives. So we must grow financial acumen. And I believe strongly that corporations around the world can really do society a tremendous favor by plugging in financial acumen training into their learning and development plans. The second technical skill is that of business acumen. I feel very strongly, and you've heard me say that several times. Frankly, anything that's in this particular episode, I feel strongly about, so I should stop saying that phrase. But business acumen. How does a business function? Far too many of us go to work in a business. We have our job. We work day in, day out in our particular department, but we really don't understand how the work that we do in our department or in our daily lives affects the flow that we're striving to create across the organization. So where do those handoffs go? If I work all day on a particular project or product, where does my output go? What team is my output and input to? And then where does it go from there? And it is that understanding of how the business operates that will help a lot with those human skills that we talked about before, especially collaboration and teamwork. How can you really collaborate and team with other people that are doing different work if you haven't really invested time in understanding what that work is? You don't have to be an expert in that work, but to understand it and have acumen in how a business functions is incredibly important. And finally, the last technical skill that everybody needs to have some degree of literacy is around data and coding. Now, this is just like me telling you that you've got to know math. And I'm going to tell you that. You got to know math. So many people say, oh, I can't learn math. And that's absolutely a false narrative for the vast majority of the population. We don't like learning math. Math is intimidating. Math can be scary. But when it's taught properly and broken down into its component parts, it's very approachable. I'm a musician, as I said at the top of today's show, and you might think that music and math don't go together, but music is mathematics. Music can be portrayed as mathematical equations. And so math and music are inextricably linked with one another. So you can learn math too. Back to my story, data and coding. A lot of people don't want to hear this, but we must understand the data that we create on a day-to-day basis in our jobs and the value that that data can create and can have for our customers and for our coworkers and ultimately for the success and profitability of our business. We should also understand the basics of coding. I had a podcast with a gentleman named Paul Smith, who's the former chief executive of CFA Institute, and he surprised me a little bit because I asked him the question, what's the skill that every person in finance should know? And he said coding. Now, I'm a computer science minor in my undergrad, so I did a little coding, almost 38, 39 years ago, is a long time ago. But I've used my coding skills in a number of different ways throughout my career, especially as it relates to highly structured arguments and logical flow of those arguments. Coding skills basic coding skills can go a long way toward that. Now, most everything that I've talked about sits on a foundation of lifelong learning. One of the other things you'll hear from me over and over and over again is the importance of learning and development. In your business, learning and development should not be some afterthought that comes from some failure in the business. Oh, this thing failed, so we better teach everybody the thing that drove the failure. No, we need to be thinking much more proactively about learning and development and really weave learning and development into the flow of your business and be teaching through our business operations the benefits of lifelong learning to everybody that works in the business. You see, many of us have been conditioned through the years to imagine that early in our lives is when we did our learning, and then we do a lot of working, and then we retire. Well, that whole construct is rapidly breaking down. And I'm sorry to say that this concept of retirement and then I don't need to do anything more in my life, that is definitely going to be breaking down. Individuals that are just entering the workforce today will have a much different relationship with work because they can see very clearly, hopefully, that their working life is going to be much longer. It's going to extend much longer into their lifetimes. So this concept of learn, then work, then retire, we literally won't have the population growth on the front end to support all the retirees on the back end. If you're thinking about it just, from the nuts and bolts of the math behind why we must adopt lifelong learning strategies. It's almost an economic imperative for us here, definitely in the United States, but all around the world. So that's one of the things that we're going to be talking about a lot is this concept of lifelong learning and learning woven into the culture of your business. So that we don't reach these cliffs where all of a sudden we've got to completely retrain or reskill ourselves when our job gets disrupted by that computer that can think at low but ever-increasing cognitive levels. Now, I'm going to leave you today with a reading of a short excerpt from my book, Balancing Act, just to give you a little bit of a better feel for what that book is all about and, frankly, a little bit more about what I'm all about. So I start on page 166. Before we get started, my wife, Linda, is a horse person. She's an equestrian, and so you'll see that come out here. Recently, I woke up on the wrong side of the bed. A few bad dreams, an extremely early flight, concern over a few dropped balls. You know the drill. A previous version of myself would have gone throughout the day with an extra crease in my eyebrows, my introversion taking over to limit communication with the outside world until I selfishly worked through my funk on my terms. I was typically oblivious to how my mood was impacting those around me. I've learned, mostly the hard way, that I'm in control of my mood. Although the circumstances that contributed to my current state may be outside of my direct control, the one thing I'm absolutely have control over is how I respond and how I move forward. I believe that the people around me genuinely care about my well-being and want to help me wrestle with my personal challenges. However, their ability and tolerance to do so is limited by their own baggage, bad dreams, early flights, and dropped balls. Linda is an equestrienne and competes at an advanced level in the art of dressage. In dressage, there is the concept of a half-halt. A half-halt is where the rider performs a nearly imperceptible collection move to prepare for the next part of the routine. The half-halt is designed so that the horse and rider can effectively take a breath to rebalance and properly transition from one movement to the next. It's important to note that the routine doesn't stop. To the untrained eye like mine, one would hardly notice that a half-halt has occurred. We can all learn from the concept of the half-halt. Most of us live in a non-stop world, spaces and places where we get to truly stop, smell roses, and breathe are few and far between. The train keeps moving and rarely stops to let us on and off. We need tools like the half-halt to help us collect and reflect while still moving forward. So that morning when I woke up on the wrong side of the bed, I did a half-halt between calls on the drive to the airport as a reminder that I'm the one who's in control of my mood and that the people around me need to be focused, positive, and in control. I want to give more than I take from this world. And the half-halt construct has helped immensely to improve my emotional quotient and situational awareness. I'm not perfect by any measure, but by using a half-halt, I'm able to more clearly see the impact my mood is having on others and adjust more quickly. If you'll indulge me with a brief aside, most people have never heard of dressage. Of those who have, many would describe it as being as exciting as watching paint dry. In reality, it's quite an extraordinary sport. Watching Linda improve over the years has taught me valuable lessons in persistence, tenacity, patience, and relationships. Imagine having a partner who can only understand your communication cues through gentle, tactile movements. Now imagine if your golf clubs or your tennis racket had a mind of their own. The concept is similar in business. You're constantly working with imperfect information and need to produce results by working with teams composed of humans who look, think, and feel differently than you do. The best teams are populated by individuals from different backgrounds, cultures, and geographies. As a leader, you attempt to create clarity through communication that gets interpreted differently by nearly everyone on the team. This inconsistency in interpretation forces you to repeat yourself to the point of being uncomfortable and listen in ways that you never thought you'd have to in order to create harmony, balance, and understanding. Part of your leader standard work should include creating your own version of the half-halt. Remember that our job in this life is to give more than we take. Having the ability to self-correct mood and demeanor quickly while the horse is still moving will help improve your emotional quotient and situational awareness. Having a keen sense of you is half the battle. Thank you so much for indulging me today. I'm Andrew Tempty. You can find me on LinkedIn, on Twitter. I'm on Facebook. I'm also at andrewtempty.com. Periodically, I even post things up on Instagram when I get around to it, but it's primarily those social media accounts. Thank you so much for your attention today. I hope you got to know a little bit more about me, and I hope to be able to contribute to your improvement and your own personal continuous improvement journey.